You! Stop right there! Elijah Carter had barely stepped into first class when the voice sliced through the cabin like a dagger. Passengers turned, phones lifted, eyes narrowed. Haley Pierce, flight attendant, blocked his path with a tray cart, voice sharp. You can't be here dressed like that. This area is for real pilots. He stood still, calm, 4 gold stripes on his sleeve gleaming. 20 years of flying, and still, call security, she barked. Elijah said nothing, but his silence would be the storm. A storm that would bring an entire airline to its knees. Elijah Carter didn't flinch. He adjusted his cuffs slowly, the polished Sky Titan wings on his chest glinting under the LED cabin lights. Calm, calculated, composed. He had dealt with turbulence 1,000 feet above ground. But this was different. This was turbulence wearing a navy skirt and name tag that read, Haley Pierce. "I asked you to step out of this area," Haley said, her voice sharpened by authority, or what she thought was authority. "You're not allowed here. You're not crew." Elijah's gaze drifted toward the cockpit just 20 feet ahead, so close, yet barricaded by prejudice. Around them, first-class passengers exchanged glances. One man frowned. A woman in 2B whispered something under her breath. Then came the telltale click, a phone camera activating. Jordan White, a teenager in 3A, tilted his phone vertically and began filming. "Bro," Jordan muttered, low but audible. "They're stopping a pilot? For real?" Haley stepped forward, lowering her voice just enough to feign discretion. "Look," she said, not looking at him. "You don't look like any pilot I've ever flown with. Just admit it. You're trying to sneak in here. Security will sort it out." Elijah said nothing. Haley's fingers darted to her radio. "Gate control. This is cabin lead Pierce. I've got an unauthorized male in uniform attempting to access the cockpit. Please dispatch security immediately." The words bounced off the cabin walls. Unauthorized, male, in uniform. Elijah could see it in their eyes now. The doubt, the judgment, the fear wrapped in etiquette. Some passengers tightened their seatbelts reflexively. Others leaned in with curiosity. And a few, like Jordan, simply stared, recording every second. "I have identification," Elijah finally said, voice low but firm. Haley raised an eyebrow. "Fake IDs don't count. I'm scheduled to pilot Flight 228 to Seattle." "Sure you are." A beat passed, then 2. Elijah could hear the distant buzz of security boots echoing through the jet bridge. Someone in 1C stood. "Miss, I believe he—" Haley cut in. "Sir, please sit. We have protocols." The man remained standing. Meanwhile, Elijah simply adjusted the strap of his flight case and took one small step forward, enough to trigger another sharp command from Haley. "Don't move." But he did. Just one step closer to the cockpit. One step deeper into the storm that was about to erupt. And though no one knew it yet, that step had just changed the course of the entire airline. Elijah reached calmly into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a sleek leather credential wallet. With a quiet confidence born from years of routine, he unfolded it to reveal his pilot's ID, flight license, and Sky Titan issued crew badge. The holographic watermark shimmered as he held it up toward Haley. "There," he said simply. "Captain Elijah Carter, scheduled to fly 228 to Seattle. Check the manifest." Haley didn't even lean in. She let out a short, mocking laugh. "You're seriously going to double down on this? I've seen better fakes on Halloween." Some passengers gasped. One woman in 2D audibly whispered, "That's too much." But Haley was unfazed. She turned to a nearby flight attendant and waved her hand dismissively. "Tell Mason to send someone down from the gate." Before Elijah could speak again, another voice cut through the murmurs. "What seems to be the issue here?" A woman in her 50s appeared at the cabin door, dressed in a sharp blazer and ID lanyard. Her nameplate read, Linda Carson, Terminal Manager. She walked with the brisk, no-nonsense stride of someone used to snapping decisions into action. Passengers turned their attention. "Security's already been called," Haley announced proudly. "This man's impersonating a pilot." Linda raised an eyebrow, but didn't look at Elijah. "Is that so?" "I provided credentials," Elijah said, stepping slightly toward her, badge still visible. "Captain Carter, Flight 228. Linda finally glanced at the ID. 1 second. 2. Then looked back at Haley. Doesn't match the manifest, she said curtly, without checking anything. Protocol says we don't argue. We remove. Elijah didn't react, but he did check his watch. Everything all right, sir? Asked Jordan from 3A, still holding his phone, now live streaming to an unknown number of viewers. The red dot blinked steadily. Elijah turned his gaze back to Linda. You haven't verified anything. We don't have time for this. You're disrupting operations. Elijah's phone buzzed. He glanced down at the screen. A message from Victor Chen, Sky Titan's CFO. Board meeting moved up. Be ready. I've got the documents. He locked the screen again. No one saw the text, but a shift in his posture said enough. The calm wasn't passive anymore. It was loaded, intentionally withheld. Linda crossed her arms. You have two options. Step off the plane or we remove you. Your choice. A second flight attendant appeared behind her, radio in hand. Security's on the way. Elijah didn't move. He didn't argue, but he did smile, just barely. That unnerved Haley more than anything. Excuse me. A man in seat 1D stood up, his voice calm but firm. I've flown more times than I can count. That man is a pilot. You can't just... He's not authorized, Haley snapped, eyes never leaving Elijah. Look at his uniform, the man insisted. Look at how he's carrying himself. A few murmurs of agreement rippled across first class. A woman near the aisle leaned toward her husband. He doesn't look like someone pretending. But before the momentum could build, Mason Reed arrived. He stepped onto the aircraft with the hurried authority of someone who had been summoned mid-coffee. His clipboard clutched in one hand, earpiece still hanging loose. Mason surveyed the scene with a mix of impatience and arrogance. He didn't even glance at Elijah. What's going on? Haley wasted no time. Impersonator, claimed he's the pilot for 228. I called security. Linda added, he's refusing to comply. Protocol says he needs to be removed immediately. Mason looked at Elijah for the first time, then glanced at the passengers who were clearly unsettled. He didn't care. You, Mason barked. Step off the aircraft, now. Elijah didn't move. Mason stepped closer. Look, I don't know what kind of stunt you're trying to pull, but we don't need distractions right now. Don't make this harder. I'm not making anything harder, Elijah replied, his voice even. I'm following procedure. You're the one skipping steps. Sir, Mason cut him off. This is your final warning. Either leave voluntarily or we'll have you escorted out. There was no point arguing. Elijah stepped back, took his flight case, and allowed himself to be walked toward the door. Cameras followed. Jordan's live stream picked up every angle. Some passengers looked relieved, others disturbed. A few remained frozen, unsure how to react. As Elijah reached the threshold of the aircraft door, something unexpected happened. The gate radio crackled. Control to all Sky Titan gate agents. Immediate hold. Repeat. All operations under temporary suspension. Secure aircraft. Stand by for update. The words stopped Mason mid-stride. He pressed his earpiece tighter. What the hell? He muttered. Linda's phone buzzed. She glanced down, then did a double take. Is this system-wide? She asked aloud, disbelief coloring her voice. On the terminal monitors beyond the glass, flights began to update. Delayed, delayed, delayed. Then, one by one, canceled. Passengers inside the cabin stood up, peering toward the gate. The atmosphere shifted from confrontation to confusion. Something was happening, something big, and Elijah, he just watched. Not smug, not angry, but with the knowing stillness of someone who had just pulled the first brick from a wall about to fall. Elijah took a seat near gate C-12. Calm as ever, he set his flight case beside him and reached into his jacket. From an inner pocket, he pulled out a black phone. Sleek, heavy, with no branding. No camera. Just a matte surface and a small red light blinking softly at the corner. He unlocked it with a biometric scan, pressed a single button, and brought it to his ear. One ring. Authorization code. Delta 7 X-ray. Initiate sequence blackout. Click. The call ended in under 7 seconds. Elijah leaned back in the chair, hands resting on his thighs. He didn't check his regular phone. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Inside the terminal, a strange hush fell over the crowd. Conversations dimmed. Heads turned toward the large flight information screens mounted above the concourse. Flight 112, delayed. Flight 191, cancelled. Flight 228, suspended. Then came the red banners. Operations suspended. Operations suspended. Operations suspended. All at once, the airport pulsed with alarm without a sound being made. Staff murmured into radios. Pilots stepped out of cockpits to verify the alerts. Ground crew looked at their handheld devices and blinked in confusion. Back inside the jet bridge, Mason stared at his tablet, which had just rebooted itself. System error, it read. Connection to Sky Titan command lost. What's going on? Haley asked, panic creeping into her voice for the first time. Linda's phone buzzed again. She answered, nodded once, then went pale. They said it's coming from the central command node, but no one at HQ initiated it. Elijah watched from the sidelines as the ripple turned into a wave. In the control tower above, a young air traffic controller named Zoe pushed back from her desk. Sir, she said to her supervisor, we've lost ping feedback from every Sky Titan aircraft. Our systems can't push updates. It's like they're locked from the inside. Try backup routing, her supervisor barked. Already did. No response. They both looked at the screen. A map of blinking aircraft icons. All Sky Titan planes were frozen in place, held in some kind of digital limbo. Back at Gate C-12, Jordan's live stream had exploded. Something's going down, y'all, he whispered, panning from Elijah's stoic face to the red glowing departure board. His viewer count had passed 4,000, and still, Elijah said nothing. He merely reached into his flight case, pulled out a copy of The Art of Crisis Management, opened to the first page, and began to read. Like he had all the time in the world. Clear the front cabin, a voice commanded. 3 figures stepped onto the aircraft with urgency, cloaked in tailored suits. Victor Chen, Sky Titan's CFO, led the way, flanked by Chief Legal Officer Dana Morales and Director of Communications, Evelyn Ross. They looked like a task force built for damage control. Haley's mouth opened in disbelief. Wait, why are they here? Victor didn't answer her. He didn't even look her way. His eyes locked onto Elijah, still seated calmly near the front. Passengers watched in stunned silence as the cabin transformed into a war room. Elijah, Victor said quietly. Are we doing this here? Elijah closed his book. Seems like the perfect place, doesn't it? Dana glanced nervously around the cabin. We should move this to the briefing room. No, Elijah replied. Everyone here deserves to witness this. Mason tried to step in. Who gave you authority to bring executives into this aircraft? Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Authority? She pulled out a tablet, turned it around, and showed Mason a live feed of CNN. Breaking, Sky Titan grounds fleet amidst internal emergency. Sources cite executive override at Gate C-12. Jordan's live stream was still running. Now over 7,500 viewers. Hashtags were multiplying. #Sky Titan lockdown # who is the Captain Victor took a step forward. If we're doing this, let's make it official. Elijah stood for the first time since the confrontation. The entire cabin held its breath. He reached into his flight case and pulled out a small titanium card, black with gold trim. Sky Titan's executive shareholder card. Only 10 existed globally. He held it up, not to gloat, but to clarify. My name is Captain Elijah Carter. I hold 42% controlling interest in Sky Titan Airlines. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Haley dropped her service pad. Mason blinked like he'd seen a ghost. Linda stepped back into the aisle, her voice barely above a whisper. That's impossible. No, Elijah said. What's impossible is how long it took for this company to address its own rot. What's impossible is how someone like me, fully licensed with years of service, can be dragged out of his own aircraft because of how he looks. He turned slightly toward the passengers. I grounded every Sky Titan flight today not to punish you, but to wake this system up. Dana was already pulling out compliance documents. Evelyn had opened a media prep file. Victor checked his watch. We're on the clock, Elijah said. This isn't just a PR mess. This is the moment everything changes. Everyone thought that was the twist, but Elijah hadn't even started yet. Elijah stood quietly for a moment, letting the weight of his last statement settle into the bones of every person in the cabin. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. Phones stayed up, but hands were trembling now. Then he spoke again. "This isn't the first time I've been mistaken for something I'm not." His voice was calm, not bitter, but it held the gravity of memory. 8 years ago, I walked into the cockpit of a Sky Titan flight scheduled for a routine hop from Phoenix to Denver. It was my 3rd flight that week. My name was printed on the manifest, and I'd flown with the same co-pilot before. He looked at Haley, but the gate agent that day didn't see my badge, or my wings, or my flight log. He saw my skin and assumed I was maintenance. A low murmur stirred in the cabin. The businessmen in 1D clenched the armrest. Linda looked away. Elijah continued. "He radioed the tower, said one of the janitorial staff has wandered into the wrong zone. I was escorted out in front of the crew, the passengers, the very people I was meant to lead." Dana glanced at Evelyn, who was already typing furiously. "I was suspended for creating confusion." That was the official reason. But what they didn't know was that I'd recorded the entire thing. Elijah pulled out a tablet from his case and tapped it. A screen behind him lit up. Passengers gasped as video footage played. A younger Elijah, same composed stance, being confronted in the cockpit. A voice on the audio. "Sir, this area is for flight crew only." "I am the flight crew." The video cut. "I didn't go public then," Elijah said, "because I wasn't ready. I wasn't strong enough. But I made myself a promise. I would never let a moment like that happen again, without consequences." He turned to Victor. "That's when I began the acquisitions." Victor nodded solemnly. He built a shell company, acquired minority shares through silent investors, took controlling interest without a single headline. "Why?" Mason asked weakly. Elijah's eyes met his. "Because power listens to money more than morality. So I gave myself both." The room fell into a reverent silence. This wasn't vengeance, it was design. And for the first time, everyone on board began to realize this wasn't a breakdown of order. It was the execution of a long-planned correction. "Let's talk about the live stream," Elijah said, his voice steady but pointed. All heads turned to Jordan, still holding his phone, the red recording light still blinking. His fingers tightened around the device. Victor stepped forward, tilting his head toward the teenager. "You ready?" Jordan nodded. He stood slowly, stepping into the center aisle with more confidence than expected. Not nervous, prepared. "I'm not just some kid with a phone," he said. "My name is Jordan White. I'm a 3rd-year law student at Howard University, focusing on civil rights litigation. 3 years ago, I applied to intern with Sky Titan's legal department. I made it to the final round until someone decided I didn't fit the brand." No feedback, no follow-up. Passengers shifted in their seats. The energy in the cabin thickened again. "I reached out to Elijah after seeing a talk he gave at a diversity summit," Jordan continued. "Told him what happened. And he said, 'How would you like to make it count?'" He raised his phone. "This live stream wasn't an accident." Gasps erupted. Haley visibly recoiled. Linda looked like she'd been sucker punched. "This was part of a transparency protocol," Jordan explained. "If the system corrected itself, no action needed. But if it failed, if bias played out in real time, if someone like Elijah was humiliated again, the world would see it." Elijah nodded from his seat. "The data we've gathered over the past 2 years shows that visual evidence is more powerful than internal reports. People don't believe memos. They believe video." Jordan tapped his screen, revealing a split feed, multiple angles of the incident from within the plane. The footage had been auto-synced from surrounding passengers. A quiet tech upgrade Elijah had funded himself. "And yes," Jordan added, "those passengers didn't know they were helping, but every moment they captured supported a timeline of truth. Truth you can't spin. Truth you can't redact." Dana Morales, the legal chief, turned to Victor. "The viral metrics on this are already irreversible." Victor replied, "And that's the point." Jordan lowered his phone. "This isn't just going viral. It's going institutional. Every action taken today will be archived, time-stamped, and publicly accessible." Linda's voice cracked. "This is a setup." "No," Elijah said firmly. "This is a mirror, and you're upset at what you see in it." Passengers stared. silent and stunned. The twist had landed. And now, no one knew what else Elijah had planned. Elijah stepped forward once more, standing in the center aisle like a professor before his most difficult lecture. "I know many of you think this is about a single incident," he began. "A confrontation, a misunderstanding, a mishandled protocol." He scanned the room. "It's not." Silence followed. Every eye locked on him. "I wasn't scheduled to fly today," Elijah said. The cabin rippled with disbelief. "I didn't miss a gate change. I didn't forget my ID. I wasn't late for duty. This," he gestured around the cabin, "was orchestrated by me for a reason." Victor stepped forward, producing a thin folder and passing it to Dana, who began distributing documents to a few passengers. Inside were printouts marked confidential, internal bias response simulation. "This was a live field assessment," Elijah said, "for a policy we've spent 18 months developing. Sky Titan's new anti-discrimination framework is designed to test not only individual behavior, but system-wide response." He pointed to the tablet Evelyn was holding. The screen showed real-time evaluations, facial recognition analytics, time-stamped radio logs, AI-generated risk assessments. "Every interaction," Elijah continued, "was logged, every decision timed, every failure categorized." Haley sank into a seat, pale. Linda's arms dropped to her sides. Mason looked like he wanted to vanish. "I wanted to believe," Elijah said quietly, "that we'd changed. That the work we've done in training, recruitment, leadership, it was enough. So I walked through your front door unannounced. Not as CEO, not even as captain, just as a black man in uniform." He let that sit. "I wanted to see who you really were, when no one was watching," Victor added. "The flight data delay. Engine warm-ups halted, all part of the simulation. We suspended operations for 90 minutes to make space for the truth." A passenger in 2B whispered, "This was a test." Elijah nodded. "And you failed." Gasps. Some passengers exchanged guilty glances. Others looked down. "But the point," Elijah added, "wasn't to trap anyone. It was to measure readiness, to understand how far we still have to go." He paused, turning toward the front of the plane. "And today, I got my answer." The emotional weight hung like fog. This wasn't revenge. This was accountability. With a surgeon's precision, a system had been measured, and now it was time to rebuild it. Dana Morales stepped to the front of the cabin like a prosecutor entering court. She held a slim binder in one hand, marked with Sky Titan's gold seal. Her voice, though calm, carried the weight of finality. "Effective immediately," she began. "We are initiating formal review and disciplinary procedures for conduct in violation of Sky Titan's core ethics policy." She turned to Paula first. "Ms. Carson, you disregarded protocol by failing to verify valid credentials. You authorized security removal without proper due diligence. Your failure to de-escalate escalated this to a reputational crisis." Paula's voice cracked. "Please, I have 2 children in college. My husband was just laid off. This job—" Dana raised a hand. "That doesn't undo the choice you made in the moment. Sky Titan's policy 6.3 states that discriminatory behavior, implicit or explicit, is grounds for immediate disciplinary action." Haley sat frozen. Her mascara had already begun to streak, but her hands stayed clenched at her sides, refusing to wipe the tears. "Miss Pierce," Dana said, "your behavior was recorded from 5 independent angles. You dismissed valid identification. You escalated the situation by calling for security without verification. You publicly humiliated a certified pilot and current executive." Jordan tapped his phone, projecting the footage on the seatback screens. 5 simultaneous recordings. Passenger phones, internal security cams, and Jordan's own stream showed Haley repeatedly cutting Elijah off, raising her voice, doubting him aloud. One by one, phrases echoed through the cabin. "You don't look like a real pilot." "Nice costume." "This isn't Comic-Con." Gasps, shakes of heads, even a few quiet sobs. Mason tried to speak, but nothing came out. Dana didn't need prompting. "Mr. Reed, as gate supervisor, your responsibility was to confirm, not assume. Your failure to even read Mr. Carter's credentials constitutes both negligence and complicity." Victor stepped forward now, holding a tablet displaying projected legal costs. If this footage goes to court, we're looking at class action suits exceeding $30 million. Loss of federal contracts, civil penalties, DOJ involvement. The silence thickened. Elijah hadn't spoken since the footage started. He stood beside Jordan, hands folded, expression unreadable. This wasn't triumph. It was accountability. Measured, controlled. Passengers looked at him not just as a pilot or a CEO now, but as a man who had held back every right to retaliate, choosing instead to illuminate. No yelling, no threats. Just the truth, made impossible to deny. Dana closed the binder with a soft snap. "The question now," she said, "is how we move forward." And all eyes returned to Elijah. Because this reckoning wasn't over yet. Elijah stepped forward again, slow and composed. His gaze swept across the cabin, not with judgment, but with clarity. "I didn't ground this airline to destroy careers," he said. "I grounded it to wake it up." He looked at Paula, Haley, and Mason in turn. "You've seen the damage, the humiliation. Not just mine, but the companies, the industries. You were part of a broken reflex, but you weren't the cause of it alone." He paused. "So now you have a choice." Victor handed Dana a small stack of papers. She distributed them carefully. 3 packets, each one bearing the title Restorative Action Agreement. Elijah continued. Option 1, immediate termination with prejudice. Your name's entered into our internal watch list. No possibility of rehire, subject to litigation depending on civil suits. Haley paled. Option 2, he said, is harder, but it's also redemptive. 6 months unpaid assignment with our partnered civil rights organizations. Bias training, community outreach, and a full audit of your professional conduct. He turned to Paula. You'll begin as a trainee gate agent, from the bottom. You'll submit monthly reflection essays to our ethics board. If completed with sincerity, you'll be reinstated. Then to Mason. You'll be reassigned to customer accessibility, working with passengers with disabilities and underserved communities. Mason looked down, silent, but nodded. Finally, he turned to Haley. You'll work with our diversity training team, not as a leader, but as a case study. Your story will be told, and your role in it will teach others what not to become. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I'll do it, she whispered. All of it. The entire cabin sat in stunned silence. This wasn't the retribution they had expected. No heads rolled, no handcuffs clicked, no angry tirades. Instead, Elijah offered accountability with compassion. Jordan lowered his phone, no longer filming. He looked at Elijah with something between awe and gratitude. This isn't just about fixing a company, Elijah said. It's about fixing the instinct to exclude, the impulse to distrust people who don't look like us. Dana signed the forms with a quiet nod. Evelyn confirmed the agreements had been logged and time-stamped. Victor whispered, they're going to talk about this for years. Let them, Elijah replied. But let's make sure what they talk about is the change. Passengers began to clap, slowly at first, then swelling with force. Not applause for a show, but for a decision. A man. A moment. A reckoning had passed, and redemption had begun. 6 months had passed since Flight 228 never left the runway, but changed the course of an entire industry. The world hadn't forgotten. In fact, it had paid attention. In a high-ceilinged conference hall in Geneva, surrounded by banners of every major airline and flags of 47 nations, Elijah Carter stood before a crowd of executives, regulators, and press. Behind him, a towering screen displayed one simple phrase, the New Sky Initiative. He wore no captain's hat today, no wings on his lapel, just a dark suit, a simple pin, and the calm presence of a man who no longer needed titles to assert his authority. This, Elijah began, is what happens when we choose to evolve instead of react. The audience leaned in. He gestured toward a side screen, which brought up profiles of 4 people, none of them Elijah. First, Haley Pierce. Once a symbol of unchecked bias, Elijah said. Now, the coordinator of our in-house bias training division. She's led over 120 sessions nationwide, with a 96% approval rating from attendees. The screen showed Haley, mid-presentation, passionately addressing a room full of staff. Her tone was measured, her eyes serious. She had become not just a messenger, but a mirror for others to reflect. Next, Paula Carson, now head of passenger service for Terminal 4, the busiest in our system. In her first month, customer satisfaction rose 32%. Her team calls her the most patient boss they've had. Images appeared of Paula helping an elderly traveler in a wheelchair, speaking with calm authority to a rowdy gate crowd. Her posture had changed, but so had her purpose. Then came Mason Reed. He now leads Sky Titan's accessibility division, implementing policies that make travel safer and smoother for passengers with disabilities. Last month, he personally designed a program that reduced wait times for wheelchair service by 40%. Footage rolled of Mason adjusting signage at check-in, giving sensitivity training to ramp agents, and quietly escorting a blind passenger to their gate. The final image was Jordan White, Director of Internal Communications. His department reviews, investigates, and archives every employee incident involving bias or abuse of power. He built our internal whistleblower system and trains our legal interns. The audience clapped softly as a clip played of Jordan leading a Zoom session with law students, the same confidence in his voice that once narrated a live stream now shaping company policy. Elijah turned back to the crowd. These 4 individuals didn't get erased, they got rebuilt. Because this isn't about canceling, it's about correcting. It's about building leaders who've seen the edge and walked back from it. A pause. The truth is, systems don't change because we get angry. They change because we lead them differently. We rewrite their rules. We challenge their defaults. He let the moment sit. Then, I grounded a fleet to prove a point, but the point wasn't power. It was purpose. The audience rose to its feet. Not for drama, but for a man who had built transformation not out of fury, but out of vision. As applause echoed through the auditorium, the camera panned back to the main screen. The New Sky Initiative, adopted by 17 airlines, implemented across 3 continents, and just beneath it, in simple white font, it began on a flight that never took off. The sun was just beginning to rise over the tarmac at JFK International as passengers boarded Flight 717 bound for San Francisco. To most, it was just another cross-country flight, another metal bird joining the endless ballet of departures and arrivals. But to Elijah Carter, seated in the left seat of the cockpit for the first time in 6 months, it was something more. This was not just a return to duty. It was a symbol. "Pre-flight complete," said Logan Myers, his longtime co-pilot, adjusting his headset. "You good up there, Captain?" Elijah nodded, a small smile forming. "More than good." He looked out across the runway, watching as ground crew guided the last few bags into the belly of the plane. Then, over the intercom, he greeted the passengers himself. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Elijah Carter. I want to personally welcome you aboard Sky Titan Flight 717. It's my honor to fly with you today." In the cabin, Jordan White sat in 6A, holding his phone steady. He was streaming live again, but not for exposure. This time it was for posterity. 6 months ago, he said quietly to the camera, this man grounded an entire airline to prove a point. Today he flies again, and the skies are different because of him. A few rows ahead, a little girl in a lavender hoodie turned to her mother. "Is that the pilot?" Her mother nodded. "The one from the story, remember?" Moments later, there was a knock on the cockpit door. Elijah glanced back. A flight attendant leaned in. "Captain, there's a young girl who asked if she could see the cockpit. With your permission?" Elijah stood and opened the door himself. Standing there was the girl from 11B, maybe 7 years old, hair in twin puffs, gripping a small stuffed airplane. "Hi," she said shyly. "They said you fly the plane?" "I do," Elijah said, kneeling to her level. "Would you like to sit in the captain's seat?" Her eyes widened like they held stars. "Can I?" He nodded, helping her climb into the seat. Her small hands brushed the controls. "I want to be a pilot too," she whispered. "You can," Elijah said. "And by the time you are, the sky will be waiting for you." Jordan turned his camera toward the cockpit, capturing the moment. Elijah beside the girl, her smile reaching all the way to the cabin door. The image would go viral within hours. As the girl returned to her seat, Elijah sat back down and put on his headset. Logan gave him a knowing glance and Still think change is slow? Elijah chuckled. Not when it's flying. Moments later, the tower cleared them for departure. Sky Titan 717, your go for takeoff. With one smooth motion, Elijah eased the throttle forward. The engines roared, the wheels rolled, and the nose lifted. Into a new sky, not one rewritten overnight, but reshaped by courage and by choice. In that ascent was legacy. And the world, watching, quietly whispered. It all started when one man didn't just speak, he acted.